the presentation. We are recording the call so that the people who cannot attend the meeting can at least have a presentation of the demo, and we remain at your disposal for any question or comments, and of course for technical issues if needed. So today the idea is to present you the last version of the ALINUS dashboard that we have finalized based on your comments. So Jon will present you briefly the process that we have pursued to select more drastically the indicators from the organization information page, so that it's lighter for the due diligence process. We had quite a long number of indicators, quantitative indicators. So based on your comments, we have reduced this number and produced from this reduced number of information social dashboard, which can be used for your due diligence and as much as possible align with your analysis. So we will present you how it works. And if you have any last comments on the content of the dashboard, and then we can discuss with you the feedback and what you plan to do on the next steps. And thank you very much, Dina, in particular, for the very concrete example on how you test it and what are the differences between the tool that you are currently using, ECHOS, and the ALINUS dashboard. I think it will be a very valuable experience for all of us to see how we can work on this. We can share a little bit with you also where we see the value added of this. And then we can discuss a little bit the next steps. What will be, what do you plan to do in terms of testing? What can be the bottlenecks and the block, and how we can alleviate those constraints potentially? And what can be shared and presented in November in Luxembourg with the European Microfinance Week. And what we want also to share and present in March 2016 for the investor working group. So maybe, Jürgen, if you have some points to add on this agenda, or if any of you want to share any other comments or point of discussion that you want to have, and then we will start the presentation. Jürgen, if you want to unmute yourself.
No, just go ahead. I think you summarized the main topics that we propose on the agenda. But of course, I suggest once we have the introduction from you and the presentation of the dashboard, we collect your feedbacks and comments. And I mean, Dina already had some. So I think based on that, we can start a discussion. It's good that we're a small group, so we can collect the feedbacks of each of us here.
Okay, so just some technical details. You are muted, sorry, so that we don't have different. We don't have conflicting sounds. And I will pass the floor to Jon to present rapidly the process that we have used to select the last version on the organization information page. And then I will do a live demo of the last version of the ALINUS tool. So Jon, if you want to present briefly the process of selection.
Thank you, Cécile. I'm sorry I tried to upload the file on webex, but it seems it didn't work, so I'm sharing my screen with you. I've tried not to share all my files with you, but I'm not sure I'm going to succeed in that. So Cécile already shared with you Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Now
I'm sorry. I'm having some technical difficulties with webex. Who doesn't want to to share the file I have, so I have to share my screen. So, okay, Ceci went through the agenda, so I will very quickly go through the selection process that we have done. First, so I shared with you all MIVs, an Excel file, which aimed at presenting you all the organ info indicators that had been selected during the beginning of 2015. And then presenting the indicators that we had selected at Cerise for the 2 drafts of dashboards that we had built and shared with you. And then we offered the possibility to express to MIVs, okay, which indicators seemed to matter or not matter or should be dropped even, both for the org info tab and for the generic social dashboard. So we received comments from 7 MIVs, and I consolidated the data and I shared the data that I had consolidated with you the 24th of September. So what I did basically, so I realized there were many more drops than adds, obviously, as one of the comments that came from most of you that our org info and dashboard were too long. So, I went through the first selection, and I decided to drop all the indicators that had only a D, and keep, except when there was like MIVs that specified that there was an A. So thanks to this process, we reduced drastically the number of indicators. We also try to increase the consistency with mixed indicators so that we can keep on discussing with them and, trying to have mix aligned with the ALINUS indicators if we can get to that extent. But thanks to this 2-step process, we went from 320 lines in SPI4 org info to 120 lines in the latest selection I shared with you. With the dashboard, basically, we did the same at Cerise, and roughly the same process, including some of the qualitative feedbacks, emails that we had received, and we succeeded in going from 163 lines to 80 lines in the current selection of the dashboard. So, Cécile, if there is no question, I give you back the hand.
Okay, so this was the process, and now maybe Jon, you can give me the hand so that I can share my screen and do the live demo. Thank you, Jon. So I will share my screen, and feel free to interrupt me if you don't see the what you want. So can you confirm that you see the screen first?
Yes.
Good. Okay, so let's say that I am a credit analyst from one of your team. I came and visited MFI in Iran. Sorry for the, we took a fictive case and we tried to adapt with the exchange rate of this organization. So this is a fictive case, but so you have either an SPI4 which is already filled in by the organization, or you work with this organization to fill in the SPI4 ALINUS options, selecting only the indicators in the organization information page and in the questionnaire that have been selected by your group. Once the SPI4 is filled in, you will open the master, so the documents that we sent you, that will allow you to extract the indicators from these SPI for your own analysis and your own ALINUS scorecard. So you open both files in Excel, you activate the macro, you put the exact name of the MFI here in the cell with the file extension, XLSM. And in this case, you can now import the SPI4 data. So you will see on the screen a message explaining that it may take few seconds because you will have all the 80 indicators and the indicators from the organization information uploaded in the document. The steps are here in the bottom left of your screen. So here we are copying the organization information page, which takes a little bit of time because we want to make sure that you can use any version of SPI4. So the tool will extract cell by cell with the code of the information from the SPI4. So this take less than 1 minute. You see here I am on the step 5, copying the questionnaire. Step 6, updating the scorecards on the universal standards. So it's out of 8 steps. Here I am on the step 7, updating the client protection scorecards. I can change the name of the organization if I want, so I can put also the date, for example, 01 October, so I know that it's at this time that I did the... And here you see, I am now in the new social scorecard that was created based on the SPI4 file, and this file has been saved in the same folder as the ALINUS social scorecard master that you had. So now I can save, and you will see that in the master document and the scorecards, I will find, so I can select the currency that I want for the dashboard. So let's say that we want this in euro. I will put the exchange rate of the Iranian rupiah with the euro. I didn't test it yet, but I put some figure, but I can test it. And now, so in few minutes, I have updated the organization information. So all the indicators that have been selected are now in your own scorecards. The APR estimation tool. So here we have only one product with an average APR of 57%. The questionnaire with all the comments that have been made by either the credit analysts that have filled in the SPI4 or the people that have helped the MFI to conduct its own social audits. The ALINUS Client Protection Scorecard, the summary, the ALINUS US SPM Scorecard, the summary, and now, which is new compared to all what we had so far. So for some of you that already followed a demo, we already had this tool. Now we have also the social dashboard. So in this Excel file that will be generated from the SPI4, you have the ALINUS generic social dashboard with the name of the MFI, the country, the main activities, its social mission, social objectives, and the scores, ALINUS score in social performance and ALINUS score in client protection. So as you will see, it's not presented exactly the same as for the client protection, SMART assessments, or the universal standards, because it's a subset of indicators, the ALINUS subset of indicators. You can put some comments. So here I think it's protected, but I can deprotect, and then here I can put some comments as a credit analyst, for example, on the strengths and weaknesses that I see on the universal standards or client protection results. Whether this MFI has been going through a social evaluation, endorsing the SMART campaign, all your logos, and then more other type of information like the board and staff composition and gender distribution and financial services and portfolio composition and responsible pricing, as well as at the end additional comments that you can add on the general overview. For example, as a credit analyst, I can say whether I recommend or not to invest in this organization, and maybe what could be the important point to take into account in the next steps in terms of social performance, for example, or raise some points that can be shared then with the credit committee. So that's the state of advancement of the tool so far. I think now it would be important to see with you how you want to use it, what are the potential, and maybe Dina, if you want to share a little bit with us your experience and what you share with us by email also. And if you have any question on the technical issues around the importation, let's discuss. So that was the demo of the master. If you have any question or comments, if not, I'll pass the floor to Dina to share our experience.
I have a question.
Yes.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, Mara. Yes.
I just wanted to know on the score, if you go back on the top of the dashboard, the scores that are indicated, do we have any ranges of score that is acceptable, good, bad? Is there like a benchmark of what should be the score?
Yes, thank you, Mara, for this question. So it's exactly one of the points of the discussion for today, and I think no, that's great. It's a key question, and for us, it's one of the value added of this type of tool. Is that we are currently finalizing a database with the full SPI4. Jon and Alexandra in our team have been working hard on in finalizing the database and entering the 80 SPI4 that we have received so far. From this database, we can do some benchmark for the full SPI4 results and also for the ALINUS subsection, because even if the MFI did not work specifically with the ALINUS selection, we can in our database take the ALINUS indicators and score them. So we have already tested a little bit to see the difference, and this will be done in the next weeks. To really compare, first of all, the results from ALINUS and the result from the full SPI4, and what it will allow you in the next steps is that when you have some scores on your MFI, you can compare with the benchmark. So either by region, either by legal status, and I think this what we see on this is really the value of ALINUS, and maybe what could help you in your organization help the transition between a homemade tool and a standard tool is that you have the opportunity to compare the results of the MFI that you are working with a benchmark, and this is one of the value, plus all what we have discussed before, reducing the reporting burden of the MFIs, talking the same language, and exchanging practices, and really focusing on analysis and results instead of collecting information. But one of the big value would be this benchmarking opportunity. So even for SPI4, the full SPI4, we don't have the results yet, but very soon, and it is one of the points that we can discuss in November in Luxembourg.
Okay. So I guess you did some weightings of the different criteria behind every big category, and then it gives you is it like a standard weighting, or is there a specific weight for each criteria?
At this stage, it's a standard weighting. So if you go and see the scorecard, so I'm sorry, I think you see all the chat box.
Okay, now it's better.
Exactly, I didn't realize that I was sharing my screen like this. So if you see on the ALINUS US SPM scorecard, there is the score, there is a weight which is equal for all indicators for now, which is 1.25 because we have 80 indicators, so it gives a total of 100, but it's just to have a nice total of 100 instead of 80. But all indicators are weighted the same. In the future, you may decide in your own organization to have a specific weight for the different indicators, and maybe a 0 if it is something that you are not interested in. But by default, the scoring is with equal weight to all indicators. And same for the client protection scorecard. So in this case, I don't know why we have a weight here, but I'll check. But normally they are all weighted the same. But then you can decide to allocate a different weight. But as we said, it is the subsection of the selection of ALINUS is only part of the client protection smart indicators and part of the universal standard. So it's why it's really presented a different way. And in the benchmarking, we will compare. We will provide benchmark for ALINUS and different benchmark for SPI4. For the moment, I think, and maybe Dina, you can confirm from the experience with that you have, but when we tested the difference between ALINUS and the full SPI4, it seems at this stage that it's a little bit more difficult to get a high score in the ALINUS selection because you have been more in the practices and not just on the process and procedures. But we will test this with you and see exactly what are the scores and what are the benchmark dimension by dimension.
But for example, sorry, maybe because I didn't attend all the meetings, but just to understand, did you calibrate your scores so that the best IMF that you have tested your tool on has 100% score? Or
no,
is
in fact,
it's a theoretical 100%?
No, it's almost impossible to have a 100% from the experience because the universal standards are really exhaustive set of practices that any MFI could implement in social performance, but it's very rare that you do all. So in general, in fact we have a set of practices all weighted the same. And it gives the score of the dimension by dimension. But as you said, it will be very important to have a benchmark to know what is a good score and what is an average score.
Yeah, okay.
In general, we have average around 70%. It was the case for SPI3, and it seems to be the case also for SPI4.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so Dina, do you want to share a little bit your experience as there are other comments?
Sure. So basically what we did here at INCOFIN East Asia is Jeanette and myself tested the tool on two investees that we have been conducting a due diligence on recently. So what we did is we filled our own tool and then filled the SPI4 ALINUS tool. And for one MFI, it happened that social rating was also conducted recently. So it was also a good reference point. So I think our, raw findings would be that as far as the social dashboard is concerned, I think it's definitely much lighter than the previous version, and I think it's it does give a good picture of some of the main indicators that we, from an investment committee perspective, would consider important. Obviously, there's a number of financial information that, we know that we track in our in the fact sheet, in the financial monitoring tool that we use. So, we expect some pushback from our investment team if we are to tell them that they have to, entry again those data. But I guess there was mentioning of a potential link between the BRS fact sheet and the ALINUS tool, so that could potentially be solved. Another aspect is that we did not quite manage to make the APR calculation work, even though I think in the case of the MFIs we were looking at, the products that they were offering were not very sophisticated, so maybe we missed something, but we're happy to share the way we did it to try to see if it's something that we didn't understand well. But I guess overall it shows that, if we are indeed to use that tool, then maybe we need to make sure that it's sufficiently straightforward for any person with not a lot of interest in calculating APR to be able to do so without too much trouble. So that's for the organizational info / social dashboard, I guess. And then an overall comment, when we filled the tool, I think, so first, on the client protection principle, we felt that, like in the case of these two institutions, they're actually really good performers. One got a certification recently, the other one is 2 months from getting it. But despite that fact, when we answered yes or good practices, it didn't seem to fully reflect in the tool. So maybe there's something we're missing, or maybe there are some indicators that are not there we should consider. So that's one. And then second, I think, the ECOS tool is very much like a social rating tool where we assume that people during the due diligence have collected sufficient information, have witnessed sufficient systems and practices in place in order ultimately to take some distance and make a judgment on whether they feel that that practice is well in place or not. And the way we ask questions in ECOS is very, it's an opinion. It's like a social rating. Whereas obviously ALINUS is something else. It's a social audit. So, we felt that for dimension 1 and 2 and dimension 7, we felt that there was sometimes a little bit of feeling fatigue because you feel that you are trying to remember a lot of, small policies, aspects, items, details that, are important when they're all together. But when you have to actually score whether this practice was overall in place, the fact that you had to go through all these small yes, no, tick the box, we felt a little bit like we were kind of losing the big picture. So I think, for us, basically the conclusion is that we would really like to, continue piloting the tool and try to identify to what extent there might be some overlapping indicators, which as social investors we might not need to track in so many different angles. And one example would be, for instance, the questions related to, how is the CEO compensated? How is the CEO evaluated according to social goals? How is the management taking into account social goals? How is the board? All these questions are spread out, these 3 dimensions, 1, 2, and 7. And sometimes you feel, oh, but I've already answered that 3 times. So, I think here, our opinion is that there is, we are in the pilot testing phase. We feel it's a powerful tool, but we would like to see if there is interest from other investors to kind of do the same work, to help us test it on their own MFI, and to also see if we have overlapping MFIs, and to kind of, not go back to the drawing board, but to have a true look at ultimately if an investment officer with less knowledge or interest in social performance has to use this tool, how practical, how convincing, how rigorous is that tool in order for that person to conduct a good SPM analysis. And I think we're on the right road to that, but there's definitely some need to further test the tool. So that's second main comment. And the third one is indeed this idea of how comparable is an SPI4 ALINUS, versus the full SPI4. And if I, take the SPI4 ALINUS and plug them into an SPI4 and let the MFI continue doing the full assessment, how confident I am that, ultimately these core indicators that I've looked at have informed me enough on the overall social performance management of that institution so that when the institution fills the full SPI4, we end up with an overall grade that is not completely off from our analysis. So that's pretty much what we wanted to share.
Yes, thank you, Dina. And sorry for the Skype exchange on the same time because we were brainstorming internally also. I think it's great first input on the test, and we will continue to work on this. On our side, we know that the APR calculation tool is limited when the products are relatively complex and the complexity is quite frequent. So I'll test this also with you, but we know that we have to work a little bit more on this because it should help giving an idea of the average percentage rate or annual percentage rate on an easy way, but there are still some limitations. So there are also other ways to have a rapid assessment, but we have to guide also the user on this, not only for ALINUS, but in general for SPI4, and in even more general term for the follow-up steps of the microfinance transparency work, because this tool has been developed with Emmanuel Javois. And the idea is to promote it to the MFIs and the different stakeholders to have an idea of the average annual percentage rate. But we see some limitation, as you said, Dina, on the fact that it cannot calculate if the product is considered as too complex. So this is one point we can continue working on. For the financial information, there is an option now in the SPI4 to automatically upload the BRS microfact fact sheet. So that would simplify the work also of the credit analyst if we were to keep some of the financial indicators on the ALINUS scorecard, and to answer to Sasha comments, for example, on what do we do with responsible covenants, and do we want to have maybe a third optional page on the dashboard where we check that the financial data also are in line with the responsible covenants, and this should be totally aligned with the BRS fact sheet so that it can be drawn from the microfact. And then the last element of answer at the stage on the comparison between the full SPI4 and the ALINUS. I think on the test we will see that there are some differences on the results. If not, why do all the SPI4 if the ALINUS gives exactly the same scores? But we have to understand why there are some differences and how to interpret those differences. If it is logical because you are either more severe or more demanding on some aspects, or on the contrary, less demanding, it's okay. If it is not really understandable, as for the case of the case that you described, that an MFI is SMART certified and does not have a high score on CPP on the ALINUS scorecard, we have to check. And as we exchanged by Skype with Jon right now, it may come from the fact that as we have less indicators in the SMART assessment in the ALINUS scorecard, any answer no is more impacting on the final score. So we have a stronger effect of no answer in 29 indicators compared to the 99 indicators of the full SMART assessment. But we can test this, and we can see whether it means that we have to on the margin adapt some of the indicators, or if it is just a way to interpret the information and also to compare, to benchmark, as we discussed previously. So I don't know if there are any other comments on this, and maybe discussion on the plans to test it. I think it would be
ask a few questions to Dina,
yes,
quickly. Hi. Yeah, thanks a lot, Dina, for your comments. It's very interesting. I wanted to know, in terms of time, how much time did you need to fill in that tool, and if it was much more than with ECOS? And then secondly, I mean, what do you think of asking MFIs to fill it in? Would you have gotten a very different score? What's your impression on potentially having MFI fill it in themselves and then reviewing it?
Thank you, Christophe. In terms of timing, I think it was not significantly different from ECOS. I mean, we're very used to ECOS, so we have to factor that in, whereas SPI4 ALINUS was, the second one we fill it in. But overall, I don't feel there was that much difference. On your second question, in fact, I would feel very confident having the MFI fill it in and then using that as a discussion during the due diligence. Why? Because this SPI4, as I said, is more of a social audit. It's more like, do you have this in place? Do you feel that you're putting it well in place? So, having the MFI give you their opinion, and then during the discussion, having them to demonstrate to you that indeed it's in place, might be, in fact, more efficient than, asking all the questions during due diligence, but in a conversational manner, and then going back to your desk and then trying to remember whether they had indeed this practice in place or not. So, I felt, on the human resources part, precisely, you have so many questions that are actually related to, whether you have those labor, related practices and policies in place. And honestly, when I look back at how we conduct HR interviews for social, performance-related topics, we really don't, check all these things. We have the manuals in place, we check job descriptions, and then we talk to people and we just try to assess what type of, double bottom line mindset they have if, some more stressing situation that would happen to the institution. So, I think, again, it puts us in a slightly different exercise from, social rating type of approach or social due diligence to a more of a social audit.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
Hey, Tina, it's Lisa. I also have a question, and maybe this is also for Cécile, on the, because I also thought you mentioned that the MFI that you performed the SPI4 ALINUS on was SMART certified, and then ended up with a relatively lousy score, actually, in Dimension 4. And I'm wondering if maybe, because the spreadsheet that I received, or I think that we all received, does have weightings that are different for the client protection indicators. Like some have 4, some have 1, and I'm wondering if that is somehow related to the scoring. If you're able, if you can equally weight all the responses, maybe you would get a different scoring, or I'm not sure if that has any impact.
So maybe I can comment this point. So Cécile shared with you the social scorecard that we have, and as Liza mentioned, there are different weights, 1, 2, and 4, and this comes from the mapping I did in between the USSPM ALINUS indicators with CPP standards, and sometimes we had standard which matched with one ALINUS USSPM indicators. Sometimes we had a standard, for instance, 1, 2. So for the first principle, standard 2, there were 2 indicators from the selection that matched, and sometimes there were 3 indicators, for instance, that matched. For instance, dimension 3, principle 1. There are 3 USSPM indicators. So I weighted the question so that the standards have the same weight in the final score. But maybe it's not the right way to do it. I thought it would be a good way to compensate the differences between the mapping between the USSPM and the CPP standards. So I don't know if I answered your question, Liza.
Yeah, so maybe it did have an effect then, because I thought it was strange when going over Dina's email that a certified institution would get only a 54 score or something like that on client protection. So maybe it does have something to do with that.
In any case, we have to test it, and it's nice to have a very concrete example. We can test it on the case of presented by Dina, but also in general in our database now between the ALINUS score and the full SPI4 score. We can test it with 80 MFIs, so we can check that. And in particular, we can take those who are very strong in CPP. And verify whether it makes sense or if it is a very different vision that we have. And test it also with no weighting on the indicators, because usually we don't weight. So this can be one of the points that we share with you in Luxembourg. And keep you informed for those of you who cannot join. Sorry, who was talking?
No, it was Dina speaking. I think it's related to what you said, Cécile, is that as soon as you decide not to give a full yes to 1 or 2 indicators within one CPP, then because there are fewer, it does impact. So even though this MFI was CPP certified, it doesn't mean that they score 5 points everywhere. There were still some practices where the assessor felt that given the stage of development of the institution and the market where it operates, the practices were sufficient, but it was not optimal, right? So if you decide that you come to visit that institution 2 years after, and now given what they've become, it's not insufficient, then you downgrade them. But if it's 1 indicator out of 3 instead of 1 indicator out of 10, then obviously it immediately downgrades them more. But I think when we did it with the second MFI with more experience, there wasn't like such a big difference as the one mentioned in my email. So maybe we have to go back to the first one we did. So I think consistency overall is there, but it's more like the choice of indicators that we as a group decided to choose, which can now be potentially rediscussed if we feel that this is not at the end such a crucial indicator. That was one thing I wanted to mention, and another thing I wanted to mention is one comment we had when filling in the tool is that in order to remain consistent with SPI4, we kept like the wording of this is dimension 1, and then this is essential practice A within dimension 1, and so I'm thinking that we've been used to looking at USSPM and SPI4, and we expect this sort of like repetition of language, but for somebody who just needs to fill in the tool because he has to make a double bottom line credit this proposal, it's sometimes confusing that, you know, the indicator is, the wording of the indicator is so close but not quite from the essential practice, which is so close but indeed, you know, fairly, like legitimately enough not the same as the standard, which is indeed not the same as the dimension. But so I don't know if here there's also some sort of layout conversation that you know, needs to happen. I'm feeling like, you know, dimension one is a lot of wording around like, do they track their social targets, and then do they track their social goals regarding outcome on end clients, and then suddenly there's a question of, do they track social indicators that are like, you know, timely bound and measurable, and honestly I think, you know, we are keen and interested in those topics, but for somebody with less and has the pressure of, you know, making this investment you know, be rigorous but still be efficient, I'm not sure that people would really be into all those nuances and will feel it relevant to, even if you were to train them, you know, if we were to say, okay, we train our investment officers on these aspects, just to make sure, are these really the three main things we want to look at on dimension one? And when I compare it with ECOS, and I'm not saying ECOS is the best tool, but you know, maybe it's not as, you know, straightforward as it could be.
Maybe very quickly from our side, we have started to use SPI4 for our due diligences as of August. So we have done 4 proposals now based on an SPI4 analysis. And to respond to the answer to the question also that Christoph had, a lot depends, of course, on the level of awareness and pre-work that an MFI has on standards and SPI in general. We had 2 organizations in Indonesia where we were the first really to work with them on SPI. What we did before that, we have a list of questions, of due diligence questions that is split into the different departments. So there are departments the questions that we ask when we meet IT or HR, etc., etc. So one thing we did internally was to dispatch the SPI4 ALINUS questionnaire, not to follow exactly the dimensions and standards, etc., of the questionnaire, but more logical in terms of a due diligence conversation. So we split most of them into the sections that naturally we have during due diligence. Then it was the investment officer who, at the end, repatched that into the responses of the SPI4 ALINUS. What the feedback was from the 2 analysts who did those 2 was that half a day is probably a bit underestimated if you consider the collecting of information and the filling into the questionnaire. But we also have to admit that it's a new process and there is some, let's say, a customization issue before you get used to using that kind of tool. In the second case, we had an organization that had already worked with SPI. In that case, it was much faster. And the fourth case was an MFI in Africa that had done a full SPI4 analysis already within the African facility of IFD. And in that case, we were just taking the SPI4 and we could have a much, let's say, we would just base the social due diligence part on a value discussion on what can be done. What we also do in the investment proposal, besides having just the graphs and dashboard, is we have a full page of strength, weakness definition, dimension by dimension, the dimension by dimension, which is basically the outcome, the analysis of the value added of the analyst in addition to just filling that tool. And that is, I would say, that's the part that it has most value in an investment proposal, is interpreting dimension by dimension, which are the strengths and the weaknesses that we have identified with the organization during the due diligence. And that can then build on, I don't know, next steps and things we want to see a year later. Just as a feedback from where we stand from here.
Okay, so we have very concrete examples for now that maybe we can summarize and share, and that help us going further into the analysis also of the links and coherences between the tools that you were using, the full SPI4, the social audits, and also how to make sense out of all those indicators that we collect. I think the part also on the comments that come with the indicators will be also important and useful, both for the MFIs, for the credit analysts, and for the summary of information, but we can work on this. Maybe if some of you plan to test it, or if you let us know when you plan to test it, with which MFI, we can share with you also the list of MFIs that already have gone through an SPI4. We have tested, for example, with Dina and with Christophe, SPI4 that they have resaved and how to use it for ALINUS master, so we can also do that. We discussed this, and we think it would be important in terms of next steps that all of you who are interested can plan in your next due diligence to test it and give us some feedback that we may share in November 1st and in March next year. In November, we take the commitment of sharing with you also the analysis in terms of results, benchmark, comparison between the full SPI4 and the ALINUS version, and test and understand also the differences that have been raised by Dina, for example, on full CPP and ALINUS CPP. I don't know if some of you have already in mind some tests that they want to do, but we can test this. Maybe you can also put on the chat box or share with us who plan to be in Luxembourg, because it will be the next step to, and we propose to. So there is a session. Maybe I can leave the floor to Jürgen to present the session we want to have. But I think we will have also an opportunity, if some of you want to make a live demo of the ALINUS dashboard. There is a training also for credit analysts, but on the margin of this training, we can be prepared and be open to share with those people who will be there a live demo of the tool. So let us know if you plan to be in Luxembourg, if you want to share your information, your experience, and you can be in touch with us if you need any advice, support, and we are looking forward to receiving your comments on the test on the field.
Yeah, maybe very quickly. Luxembourg on the 19th of November, we have a 1 hour and a half session on SPI4 and social performance management. The idea was to split that into two practical approaches. One is SPI4 from an MFI perspective, and we were so far suggesting to have one example of an organization that we were working with, which is ACAD Palestine. I've already spoken of that a few times. We have the ACAD board meeting in Luxembourg, so we have the CEO at the meeting, and the idea was to have him present how an SPI4 evaluation has helped the organization to define an analysis of strengths and weaknesses and define an action plan to implement in terms of prioritization and see what are the priorities, and to have an action plan with timelines, etc., to implement that. If we are happy to have a second short case study, if there's somebody who would like to present that, and then we will also have an SPI from the investor perspective. The idea is to have, exactly as Cécile just mentioned, the presentation of the dashboard. And we would like to reach out to one testimony, and I invite you, if one of you wants to share that would be, I would love to have, let's say, somebody else to say a little bit on what the internal notice, basically just share the way how you are moving on in testing and let's say preparing the organization to work increasingly or to use SPI4, ALINUS, or the full tool. I'll reach out to you individually to see who is there and who can participate in that testimony. That's for Luxembourg, and I would say that, as you know, we have the investor meeting in New York in March. We are specifically reaching out for that New York meeting to the U.S. investment funds, the DWMs, Microvests, etc., who are organizations who have so far not been directly involved. And the reason is for that to have that at Deutsche Bank in New York is to have those people come. So have that on your agendas. I think this, as you know, this is usually 2 full days of work and an opportunity for us to also work together and share the experiences and the feedbacks and the observations and the limitations that we have experienced, that you all have experienced by in work by then.
Okay, so we know that Christophe will be in Luxembourg also. Lisa said that some representative of Blue Orchard will be there, so we can maybe contact this person, and maybe from the people who will attend the training on investors, we can also check whether there are some people who would be interested, first of all, to have some information, and potentially be present also on the 19th to share experience or to share expectations, because sometimes it will be a very concrete experience and sometimes expectations. I don't know if there are other points you want to raise. If not, we will make a summary of this call. We will leave the recording accessible for those of you who want to test and have a demo of the master, and we will keep in touch with all of you and the rest of the group of ALINUS to share the very last version of the file, which now can be used for any version of SPI4, because the file that we sent before the call is just for the most recent version of SPI4, which is not very practical. So we will send you a very final version of the master, the one that I used here, that can be used for any version of SPI4. And yeah, let's keep in touch in November. So for those of you who cannot be in Luxembourg, in any case, we will share with you the results of the analysis, and as proposed and as requested by Christophe, we can also share with you the list of the 80 MF files that we have in our database that have already sent an SPI4. So of course, not all the 80 are of good quality. Some of them are the beta tests from last year. But at least you know which MFIs are already more or less involved and interested. So as said, Jon also, thank you very much.
Just for your information, I take the opportunity to say to all that Dominique Weiss, who most of you know, has joined us as of today. So she's on the call, and she is joining me at this problem. So you will have her on copy, and you know that she's with us as of now.
Yes, hi everybody. I'm trying to catch up here.
Great to have you back, Dominique. We can exchange and be sure that we will keep in touch with all of you individually also to check with you if it works, if you have any problems on testing the tool and whatever. So thank you very much, Jon and myself. We are very happy to work with you all, and we know that it's a hard work, but I think it's worthwhile doing it. And let's keep in touch.
Thanks for all the
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.